What was it like for you the first time that you walked through the doors of Rideau Hall and you knew that what is essentially what is an official residence was going to be also your private home?
Well, first of all, it was a big shock knowing about the job. In the first place, I had no idea what Governors General did or anything. I was at McGill and I went secretly to the library and got all the books that I could find out on what it was like to be here. So I had a visual picture of the place, but I'd never actually been here. And we were invited for lunch by Governor General Natition and Mrs. Natition, which is the habit. We did the same for Adrian Clarkson and John Ralston Saul. And I remember turning up at the front door and thinking, gosh. And there was a beautiful aide-de-camp, a naval aide-de-camp, came a very good friend afterwards. He's no longer in the services, and standing there in his whites, looking terrific. It was quite daunting, I have to say.
You had never been here before?
No.
It must have really been a huge shock then.
It was a big shock, and I'm trying to think what season it was. It must have been summer because he was dressed in his navy whites and he looked wonderful and took me up the red carpet, which I was happy to see was slightly worn. It wasn't too new. It was just, in fact, subsequently we went to see Buckingham Palace and pay our respects to Her Majesty, and she had a worn red carpet. So I thought this was sort of nice to keep a little bit of the oldness of the place. And then we had lunch, and I don't remember much of that because you don't know what you're in for, so you don't know what questions to ask. You just, and it wasn't going to happen for a while. I think we had a month or so before we actually came. And the day of the installation was, I can't think of the right adjective, it was horrendous. It was just horrendous. We'd been staying at Rideau Gate, a lovely little house, which is for people who aren't yet here. And we'd been there for about 2 weeks. Very cozy, very well looked after. And I thought, oh, we could just stay here. It would be so nice. We didn't have to go up to the big house. And I guess we got up at about 5 that morning. It was February the 7th, if I remember correctly. It was minus 40. And nobody warned me about this, but all our clothes, everything were taken out while we were at the ceremony. So we came back to not there, but here. And there's a funny story with that.
Please, we'd love to hear it if you're
willing
to
share.
There was
myself, my sister, my mother, my 2 daughters, my stepdaughter. Wait a minute, there were 9 women. My sister-in-law, Mary, whom you met, and we all had little makeup bags. And I said, why don't we put all our makeup bags in one big carrier bag? And they had a great idea, and then we'll know where to find them when we come back. Well, they were so trying to be helpful that some sweet person had undone all the makeup bags and put them all in my medicine cabinet. And so the chaos that ensued with 9 women standing in the bathroom, which nobody had ever been in, and said, that's my lipstick. I said, no, it isn't. Or I got that in New York 6 years ago, and we never sorted it. We never got the stuff back into the bag. So that was the beginning.
That's a daunting beginning when it's already an overwhelming situation.
And I said, who moved our clothes? And then we met Mr. Chevrier. I'm sure you've heard of Mr. Chevrier. He served 9 governors general, just a lovely, lovely person. And he said, oh, well, Mr. Chevrier would have done that. And I said, a man has been in the drawer with my underwear and my things. Anyway, he became a good friend, of course, afterwards. And that's just apparently what happens.
Was it a difficult transition because of that? Because
of that. It was just difficult because you get briefing books. You get 12 in English, 12 in French, and everything's in there in the way of fact, but it doesn't prepare you at all. I think I've got it. I'm a social worker, so I think there's a niche for me to counsel incoming and outgoing vice-regal couples and their families, because you can't be prepared unless you've actually lived here and you know what some of the drawbacks are and some of the things that are good and some of the things that are bad. And then at the other end, when you leave, it's a big shock as well. So
you have had an interesting career in your own right, and then you take on a role which is very much a spousal role. Mm-hmm. It is you have your own charities of choice, of course, but you are the vice-regal consort. You are
Absolutely.
Part of your husband's role here. Was that...
Well, it was even worse for me because I didn't actually have a proper career. I was always sort of going where the wind took me and doing every job you can think of, working at CBC or Radio Canada, whatever, as a very menial sort of gopher. But what I was doing when Romeo got this job was I was a student at McGill. I was in my third year and I was going to graduate with a social work degree with a view to using it. And I couldn't. By the time we got out of here, nobody was going to employ a 60-year-old social worker, really. So that was frustrating, I think. And I thought, gosh, how does this relate to what I've spent 3 years studying? But it did, actually. Everything that I had picked up at McGill, because I'd come from England, and I had been out of touch with Canada for so long. And some of the core courses that we had to do with government and Native issues and mental health and all sorts of things that I needed to get up to speed on. Not because I didn't know we were coming here, but then when I did come here with that knowledge, it was useful. And,
we're sitting in your office. We're doing this interview in the office that you used to have
Absolutely.
here at Rideau Hall.
Absolutely.
Was it the first office you ever had?
Oh, no, I've had many
This
offices.
kind of office?
Oh, this kind of, oh, absolutely. I could have lived in this office. I loved it. I actually liked it better when I had it. It was all white and wonderful light, and I had that put in because I thought it looked nicer. I had homework to do for McGill. I had speeches to write. I had all sorts of things. So I wanted something compact but attractive. And they were going to give me this great big mahogany workstation. I said, no. So the carpenter just built me that. And I had a little TV in there, and my filing cabinet, they're still there, I'm glad to see, and my computer. And I was able to work here. But the rest was just beautiful. It had not this much furniture, and it had the fire going, and it had flowers. And
Did you connect to your husband's office?
When he didn't lock the door on the other side, yes. There was another lock on the other side. Then I had one too, so I locked mine occasionally. And we could definitely do that.
You talked about staff moving things. What was it like to adjust to a life with staff living in your home?
It was harder for me than for Romeo because he was used to public life. And he didn't see anything peculiar about having a lot of people around all the time. And the first afternoon of being here, after what do we have first? The lunch with the family, and that was the extended family, so about 40. And then we had something with the judges, I think. High court judges for an hour, tea, I think, and then we had an hour off. And I remember going up to the bedroom, putting a dressing gown on, lying on this bed, going to sleep. And I woke up, and there was an aide-de-camp at the end of the bed in full uniform. This, actually, I think I've told this story before, and my husband in one chair, and his sort of aide sitting in the other chair, and they were having a conference about stuff. And I'm in my dressing gown, and I was so incensed. I said, "Get out of here!" And Romeo said, "What's the matter?" And I said, "This is our bedroom. Well, how could you be having a meeting in here?" He said, "Well, there are two chairs. I mean, why wouldn't I?" And I just thought, we have a completely different view of private life. And the poor aide-de-camp didn't know what to do. I mean, he was rigid. He's a general now. He did quite well. But it was just very strange that first day. And then we went down for the intimate little cocktail party for 600, followed by the dinner for 150. So that was day one. That was a big day.
Did it get easier?
Yes.
Tell me about a favorite room in the house. You liked your office very much.
I love my office, and especially there was about a week or two when you had lilacs and lily of the valley, and it just fill the office with that. And I had lovely painting over the fire, which was, you'll see it. If you can ever get hold of that other tape, you'll see it. The painting that was there. It was all flowery and nice. But there was another room, and it wasn't the loveliest room. It was just my room, and it was hidden way, way up on about the 4th floor. Nobody knew it was there. And I had a desk and a sofa and a mirror, because I was trying to play the clarinet at that time, and you're supposed, well, in England anyway, where I had my first lesson, you're supposed to stand up and watch yourself in the mirror. It's a different way of teaching here, and so I thought I can always escape up there, and I would go up there, and only one person knew where I was at that time. So I love that room for that reason.
Did you feel that you were able to be private in the house? I mean, were you able to?
No. And that, there's nothing you can do about that. We did have a keypad on the door, so not everyone came in all the time. But I would say at any given time, there was always somebody in the apartment. Now, Romeo's daughter lived with us, so she was there, but she was just part of the family. And his son came very often, so he had a bedroom there. And my two daughters were Vancouver and Britain, so they weren't there that much, but they did visit. But yeah, the privacy issue, it got much worse after the attempt at 24 Sussex. Then they ramped up the security and they started putting cameras in, and so they knew where you were at any given time. And I tried to go out the gate one night with the dog, and whoosh, within 2 seconds the RCMP descended and said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm taking my dog for a walk." They said, "But you're not allowed outside the gate." I said, "Oh, okay." So I went back. So that was hard.
Did you feel within your own, I mean, could you have a sense, because I think that's very difficult for people to understand, that this is an environment, or was for you an environment, where even your private residence was really not private?
No, we lived above the shop, really. And I think a lot of people don't realize it. We don't have weekends. I mean, your day doesn't end on Friday at 5. In fact, most of the events are on the weekend, because that's when other people can come. So when we were actually working, if we had a day off, it might be midweek or something, but it would very rarely be a day off. And quite often, Romeo would go down to New Brunswick if there was any time off, and I wouldn't always go. But it's very physically tiring. And so, we've done, well, one time we were on a state visit to India, and I had 9 events in one day. That is a lot. And it was hot. It was very, very hot. And so you can't wear the same thing to double it, to the event, because they get insulted. I mean, she wore that, this morning when she went to the school, so you have to change all the time. And that was pretty taxing. But I had a wonderful person helping me do that at the time.
Tell me about cooking. Were you able to cook for yourself? No.
The kitchen was awful. I think Adrienne Clarkson did build a kitchen in there. And it changed it all around, and she had a proper kitchen. We had just a little hot plate. And you couldn't really put a pot on it because the cupboards came practically to the top of the pot. So really, electric kettle and a cup of coffee was all that you could do. One time I tried to cook. I went down to the big kitchen, huge and spotless, I have to say, absolutely spotless. All the copper bottom pots shined, all the stainless steel. And I said, "I'm making this meal from beginning to end for a friend." And I got my recipe book, and I went down, and I now know what it's like to be a chef with sous chefs, because I'd think, okay, herbs, and then herbs would appear, salt and pepper, parsley, and then as I dirtied a dish, it would be taken away and washed. That was very nice. I liked that. And they had an ancient old microwave, because they didn't believe in microwaves. You don't use, that's modern. And I was trying to make oranges and caramel, and my recipe called for the microwave. And they said, "Oh, we haven't used that in years." And they said, "Let us do it. Let's make the caramel. We can do it in 2 seconds." I said, "Absolutely not. Get that microwave. I'm making my caramel." Anyway, I finally got through the meal. That's the only mealtime I cooked in 5 years. So.
Did you not cook again because it was such a bad experience?
It was too complicated, because it absolutely traumatized the kitchen staff. I'm down in their place, and I'm wanting things that they probably don't have, and they probably sent someone out to the market to get the missing ingredient, all this. And also, I couldn't cook upstairs. It was just too small and dangerous, actually, I would think. But I miss that.
Were you able to invite friends to come for weekends? Were you able
Absolutely. No, and that was a very good piece of advice that Margie McCain gave me. She was Lieutenant Governor of New Brunswick at the time, and she said, let me tell you the most valuable piece of advice that somebody gave me, and she said, every month, close the place and invite your friends. Because if you don't do that, you'll go nuts, and you won't have any friends at the end, and she was so right. So, yes, I used to do that, and they loved it. Those that dared to speak to me, because there were some people, and it's such an odd phenomenon, because you don't really change. I mean, you are who you are, but all of a sudden, the perception of who you are has changed. And some of my best friends, and I said, why don't you call me? We've got a phone like everybody else. And they said, oh, we couldn't do that. It's far too frightening. You might be busy. And I said, if I'm busy, there'll be the answering machine, just like your house. Couldn't do it.
Did you lose friends because of it?
I think so. And Romeo had some very good friends that lived around the corner in Rawcliffe, and the same with that couple. They would absolutely not phone us, and he was saying, this is silly, they live around the corner. So we got a picnic together, and we asked the kitchen to make a picnic in a hamper, and we phoned them on our private line and said, we're coming over with a hamper. Just set the table and we will be there. And even then, the wife was absolutely traumatized. Something to do with the perception, which wasn't Romeo or me. I mean, we haven't changed a lot, but that's how they saw it.
There is a lot of protocol that goes with this role, and there are a lot of formalities that seem to be fundamental to the office. How did those affect you while you were living here in the residence?
I don't think that bothered me, because I have criticized my parents hugely for sending me to a useless school, in the sense that I didn't learn anything academic, but I learned an awful lot of protocol, which was actually quite useful in the end. And so that bit, I don't think, no, it wasn't a negative. I didn't seem to mind about that. And
did you have a least favorite room in the house?
We used to dislike the veranda until Romeo got central heating in and air conditioning, because it was too hot in the summer and it was too cold in the winter, and it was so pretty. So we used to try to have meals there, and it didn't really work because we were freezing or boiling, and he did do that. He did a lot of things that were not going to go down in the history books, like fix the roof, and we had a visitor once who opened the window, and by the radiator burst, and the whole greasy mess went down 3 stories and damaged the rug in the dining room and damaged the priceless furniture, and went into the cafeteria for the staff. I mean, it was just a nightmare. And as you probably know, the government doesn't insure. They replace. Well, those things were not replaceable. And after that, I mean, these were radiators put in and when the house was first built, and so they needed to be changed. So I think he made it possible for all those repairs to be done, but nobody's going to write that up as being a glamorous thing to have left behind, but he did. And so the least favorite, yeah, I don't know.
You know, I think that you raise an interesting point about the fact that these are, they are official residences, and they do age, and they do need to be changed. Did you feel that you had the flexibility to make the changes, to, you know, put things in, or choose the art, or paint a wall, or have something removed?
I think I remember removing some artwork, which was just absolutely politically incorrect. Stuff that had stayed here from the times of the British governors, and really some pretty awful paintings. And that I had some removed, but I think there were so many people, committees that dealt with this, the Friends of Rideau Hall and the art bank program for, what's it called when you borrow?
Yes, it is the art bank.
The art bank, yeah. And somebody in charge of the official residences who decided which things would go where, and they did a very good job. My focus was much more on social work related things and my interests outside. And Mrs. Natitian had spent 5 years making this place absolutely, genuinely returning it to its former glory, everything correct architecturally and decoratively. I didn't see there was one thing that I needed to add to that. And it wasn't my field of expertise anyway. So I went out and did stuff outside, and she'd luckily done that here. Mr. Nutrition had started to open the residence to the public, and Romeo expanded on that and opened more rooms down this corridor. So that felt good. I was glad, because it isn't our house. I mean, we just live here, but it's the house of Canadians, so it was good that they could come in.
Were you ever able to interact with members of the public who came in on these visits?
Not if they could. If they wouldn't like that. The guides did not like that, because occasionally I would go through and say something. And I think that was really not a thing to do. I think it was destroying the tour, really. They have their set piece, and I would add little bits, because I knew things from Yves, who'd been there for... He came with General Vanier when he was 17, and he left retired last year, 2 years ago. So he knew all these little stories, and I knew some of them, like the painting of Lemieux painting with the Légers, and there's a little tiny dog in it, and that's a beagle, and it was called Cashew. And Mr. Chevry and I went out and got 2 baby beagles, and he named one Cashew after the first Cashew, and mine was the sister, called Blue. And both of those beagles gave birth mine in the bathroom upstairs, and his down in his house. He lived at the gate, the gatehouse. And so we were midwives as well. And it was fun. We had 5 little puppies in the bathroom during a royal visit. The Queen was here, and she loves dogs. And she said, "Oh, could I please see your puppies?" Because she heard that. I said, "Absolutely." And I went in, and I was just, my fingers crossed, because Romeo's daughter, who lived there, often came wandering out and stuff that underwear. You would not want the Queen to be bumping. I was thinking, please, Jen, please don't come out of your room. Anyway, Queen and Lady Waiting went into our sitting room, and there was the bathroom with the Perspex door and the 5 little puppies standing up. It was a lovely scene. If I'd had a camera, I would have taken that picture and leaning over these puppies, but it was fun.
Did she pat any of them?
Oh, yeah, all of them. Yeah, she loves dogs. And,
you talk about the staff and how, it seems that it's obviously a very complicated relationship, because on one hand, there's the staff that are within your home and help to make it run, and yet on the other hand, it's also, it doesn't allow you a full privacy, but you are with them for a long amount of time.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
What's it like when you leave?
Well, it's like the Stockholm Syndrome, and you really miss them. And they are family. And all the time I kept thinking, I'm so glad I went to boarding school, because if I hadn't been used to that communal life for 4 years, I don't think I could have adapted. But the fact that I had, and we shared rooms and dorms, and I was used to that sort of communal life, that made it easier for me. But they were very lovely people, and their sole focus was to serve us and to make our lives as happy and as good as they could. That was their total devotion. And that kind of loyalty and devotion is very touching. Although it can be suffocating, it's very touching. Even today, I've just seen a few people that used to be here. And I can remember one particular member of the household, the cleaning staff, and she had a little daughter who was 3 or 2, and she was the only one that lived in Ottawa, and all the other people that had children lived in Hull, so they were in Quebec, and they benefited from the $7 daycare scheme, or Granny was there, but this particular person didn't have family and was in Ottawa, so $700 a month for daycare for this little child. So recently I asked her when I was up here, what happened? How's your little girl? She said, well, my little girl is 18, and she got a scholarship to 3 universities to study structural engineering. And she said, I guess that daycare paid off. And so it's sort of nice to hear that she's a new Canadian and that her daughter is just doing fantastically.
Because they must become like family to you.
Totally. And all their, because I guess my social work training, all their private life too it affects you, I remember we had one commissioner and his granddaughter got run over, the little child, and he was just devastated. Well, you have to go, and you have to talk to them, and you have to get involved in some of their issues. And I always had the door open. People would come and talk to me, which I liked because I felt I was being useful instead of just sitting there, not doing anything.
Did you feel when you walked around in these halls that there was a sense of the history of the country?
Yes, and I'm glad they're not taking away that. You know, you may not like the great big portraits in the tent room, but they are history. These are the former governors general, and when they bring school children in to talk about the Lord Stanley Cup and the Grey Cup, and Lord Buchan, who wrote the 39 Steps, and this is all history, and they should stay there, I think, but just so that people know. Unfortunately, they're all men, but they have one portrait of Madame Sauvé and one of Mrs. Nutrition, but they're not in the tent room. Oh, least favorite room, I just remembered it. I went down to the cloakroom one day, and all the women were down by the bathrooms in the lower ground floor. And I thought, that is very rude. I mean, these women spent 5 years here, and not the old ones, not the old English ones, they were upstairs, but all the Canadian ones were down by the bathrooms. I thought, this is horrible. I couldn't get them moved up. Couldn't get them. To this day, they're probably still down there. Are they? Mm-hmm. Oh, that's rude. They need to come up. So it's such a dismissive place to put them, given that they were not, I don't think there was one male Governor General who did the job without a spouse, or except maybe General Vanier's daughter-in-law, I think, came and became his hostess. So they work as hard, and with no pay, of course. I mean, that's not generally known. All the staff here thought that the spouses were paid, and until I put them right on that. It's not a question of money. It's not that you need the money. It's just that somehow you tag along, and that needs to come up to date, because that's not how it's going to be anymore, I don't think. As the new generations are coming up, there's a different mindset, and there are very few women spouses, I think, who would gladly give up their career in law and medicine or whatever and just walk 5 paces behind. I don't think that's going to happen. On the other hand, it's a great privilege. I'm not complaining about that. It was just the misconception. And the other misconception is we don't do anything. We're just sitting around drinking wine and eating grapes all day long. It is not like that either. We work very, very hard.
Give me a sense of what a traditional day would have been like for you here at Rideau Hall.
Okay. I'm a very late go-to-bedder, so I used to go to bed about 2 or 3 in the morning because I had to do whatever event was in the evening. Then I had to come and do my office work here because I had a lot of letters. And then I had my homework for McGill. And then I used to play Scrabble online, whatever. Just my downtime. And that took all that time till about 2 in the morning. So I didn't like getting up early. And I had a little office upstairs, which meant that because once you come down, you're down for the duration. You can't sort of disappear to the private quarters. And so you had to be fully made up, fully dressed, no runs in the stockings, shine shoes, the whole thing. And so I wanted to work, but not to be seen. So I had a nice little office upstairs, which was connected to my secretary down here. And my computer stuff was connected as well. And that's another thing. I remember the big IT guy saying, why do you keep saving all your work onto disks? I said, so you can't take them and put them in the vault. And he said, but I want to do that, and I have to do that. It's my job to take everybody's work off their computers and put it in the central vault. I said, well, I'm not going to do that because I use my computer for everything, and a lot of that stuff doesn't belong in the central vault. He was furious. And because I was putting it on the little floppies that we had in those days. And I've still got those floppies. And I just could not bear the idea that my stuff was going somewhere. And
would you have official visits? Would you have events in the afternoon, guests that you had to entertain, things of that nature?
oh yeah, so a typical day. Well, sometimes we'd have something first thing in the morning, right after breakfast. There'd be some bit like this morning, maybe starting at 10. We'd have to be ready at 9:30. We'd be down, we'd be doing that. There'd be a reception, and then might be lunch. We'd go upstairs, and we'd come down. There'd be something else in the afternoon. Tried to make it so we didn't have the 3 time slots in the day booked. You need one downtime. So you either did morning and evening, left the afternoon free, or left the evening free. It worked better that way. And I remember getting some really good advice from Madame Chrétien. She said, when you're traveling and you've got an hour or 2 in the afternoon, no matter where you are, close the curtains, make the room really dark, get completely undressed and get into your nightgown and get under the covers and pretend it's night. And even if you sleep for an hour, you've had a better sleep than if you're just lying on the top of the... And we did that. It was very good advice. And because your energy goes down. And
Catherine?
It's approaching 3.
Okay. Okay. And any other questions that we should address?
No, I think this is...
I think we've covered.
I think we've covered everything. Maybe there's one last thing.
Yep.
So I'm really interested in that comment you said that you were at McGill studying social work, and you thought, oh gosh, like really, I'm not going to be using social work here, and yet you did.
hugely.
I think that's
Sure.
interesting. Is that okay?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So just how
To expand
how
on
did
the-
you use your social work? People don't realise, as you said, what the position is, but you're actually using those skills.
Yeah, that's...
Go ahead and we'll just pretend I asked that.
Well, no, I was really very grateful to McGill and the social work school for having taught me basic guidelines for living here, because if I hadn't had those 3 years, I would have known very little about Canadian government. I wouldn't have understood the sensitivities of people from other countries who come here, so I was able to talk to them because A, we traveled, and B, I had so much interaction with my class. And then we had the staff here who were very numerous. I mean, I think it was 160 altogether with the police and the commissioners and the other staff that actually lived here. And they had personal dramas, and so it was incumbent upon me as the wife of to do what I could to make them feel better, to help them out, to give them advice if I was asked. And I couldn't have done that without my social work training. Absolutely not.
One final question from me might be how the years that you spent here impacted your view of the country itself.
Well, I think the biggest privilege was being able to visit every single province and territory, including Nunavut, which my husband opened on the 1st of April in 1999. So that is not given to the average citizen of Canada, that you have that privilege. Every part's so different, and people so glad to see you. I mean, not in any kind of false way. They just were interested, and they would tell you. They'd tell you their stories, and they would want to show us things. They want to have us home for tea. It was very lovely. That experience was wonderful. And we tried to not just do the official town hall stuff, but to actually go out and talk to people in some of the smaller communities. And I didn't get to Labrador. That's the only place I haven't been. But maybe someday. I think I said that before. But no, it was a great privilege. It had its downside occasionally. But I would like to add one thing. The entire 5 years was worth it, absolutely, for the privilege of sitting with Nelson Mandela and his wife when we just opened the veranda, and he was at the end of a 59-day world tour, and he was already in his 80s. And we sat on that veranda and had a dinner for 4, during which it alternately went freezing cold, so we put a jacket on, and then boiling hot, and it was just a lovely feeling. He is the closest to sainthood that I have ever come across, along with Jean Vanier, who's another person who came to the Citadel and gave a reception for his Foi Lumière. And he is another person who is very close to sainthood. And that was hugely wonderful.
Was there, just another question then, was there another person, because we've talked about your predecessors and your husband's predecessors as Governor General, but was there, when you took out all these books from McGill and you thought, what am I in for? Was there someone in particular who, while doing your research, you thought, I think I can most identify with that, or with what this person
I'll tell you
is?
the person, and it'll surprise you, was Lady Aberdeen. First of all, she was a social worker. Secondly, she espoused a lot of the causes that I believed in: Native children, helping with their education, which is what my scholarship's all about. And she was a doer. She was an intelligent woman. I don't know much about Lord Aberdeen, but I know a lot about her. And I'm very curious to know why she took that horse and carriage and went running off one day and fell through the ice of the Ottawa River. I mean, what was she doing? She was in a bad mood, I can assure you. And she's gone to the stable and she's got that cart out and she's taken off. Unfortunately, she and the cart and the horse and the footman went down. They got saved. And then I started thinking about all the spouses. What was Princess Louise doing painting the inside of her bedroom door? You have to be quite seriously depressed to be staying in your bedroom. And she was quite a good painter. You see her door. And what was she doing there? And I started thinking of a good thesis for some young person on not the obvious things of the spouses, the female spouses, but what was really going on in their head. For Princess Louise, she was banished. I mean, it was like Napoleon going, being banished. I don't know what her husband had done, but something that warranted him being sent to the colonies. And she felt she was in prison, and she was very unhappy. And I think she went home eventually. But there are others, so I guess Lady Aberdeen, I thought she was a feisty lady, and I would like to be like her.